Hello everybody and welcome back to another video, and the Canadians get another win, another regulation win, 4-3 over the Vancouver Canucks. Another pretty good game. Definitely kind of an interesting game, I would say, compared to the way that we've been seeing the Canadians play recently. And by that I mean really the Canadians were just really slow out the gates, which has not been the case so far this year. I think going into Edmonton, I think as of now they've scored first in like 7 of the last 10 games or something like that. They've been having really hot starts and then just trying to hold on throughout the rest of the game. This one was kind of the opposite of that. The first period is not super inspiring by any stretch. They ended the period 1-0 in favor of the Canucks. Elias Pettersson gets the goal. He was just kind of like left wide open in front. He had the entire net to shoot at. So that's an unfortunate one. Really just kind of generated by the fact that Alexander Carrier was playing offense. We had a good period of zone time previous to that. Carrier kind of jumped in the play. It didn't really work our way. It didn't score, obviously. And then what ended up happening was Demidov ended up like covering for Carrier on the defense. And as we can tell from the way this game went and the way the season has gone, we know that Demidov is talented in a lot of different ways, but as a defenseman, definitely not the case. He kind of just left Pettersson wide open there and then tried to end up blocking a shot instead, but Pettersson was able to shoot right past him and Doby and gave them a 1-0 lead there. So kind of unfortunate. We were a little bit overzealous, I think, offensively, and it didn't really work out in our favor. And then, we ended up getting scored on the other way because we weren't able to, defend as well. We kind of forgot about that part of the game, trying to score a goal. So it's all right. I mean, I like seeing the defensemen, activate and try to, keep the plays alive in the offensive zone, give us chances to score goals, but not necessarily at the expense of, goals the other way. So yeah, kind of a frustrating way to get scored on there. But the whole first period I thought was just kind of they just didn't really look like they were there. Maybe a little bit of last game bleeding into this one, so a little bit frustrated. And offense not immediately being generated. So I just felt like they were kind of just behind it a little bit early on in the game, and that kind of bled into the second period as well. Jacob Bruss scores one on the power play. So it's just kind of the way things go. We're taking more penalties too, which is kind of just been a theme so far this year. We took 3 penalties in that game, and that was followed up by 3 Vancouver penalties. So at least it was even this time as opposed to the last game. And I'm not one to say that the referees should balance the game in terms of calls, like give a call the other way because of a call that was called one way. I think that's kind of silly. I think that if you're going to take a bunch of penalties, then you should be penalized and not necessarily balance the game out if it's not, balanced in terms of what's going on. But, definitely in a situation where both teams are getting called, you should call it both ways. But either way, we get scored on the power play there. DeBrusk is able to tip in a Quinn Hughes shot. And then we're in a hole early, so it's something we haven't really experienced all year. We played 10 games, and this is the first time I think that we've been, in a hole early to start it. I think even I go back to the Toronto game, then game number 1. I think we were in the lead at one point. Like pretty much every single game we've played this year, something I've kind of been thinking about recently. Every single game we've played this year, we could have won. I genuinely think that like obviously it's not going to happen, and you're going to lose games. Some things are just going to not bounce your way, but I genuinely think through 10 games, I think the Canadians could have won all 10 of those games. They're in a position to do so through all 10 of those games. So definitely a good start, a great start to the season, really. But this is the first time I think in those 10 games where we've kind of had to dig ourselves out of a hole that we've kind of made for ourselves, and not necessarily getting what we want there. Just playing really slow is really the main thing through the first half hour of the game. Really just kind of just behind it. Vancouver was dictating a lot of the play, out shooting, all that kind of stuff. So but the way that they respond, that's the important thing, and I think that's the thing that is going to take this team far this year if they continue to play the way that they are is the fact that they're not, down on themselves. They've got a resilience that we've seen multiple times this year. Just, we've had a lot of games this season where we've been, behind, we've been down, all that kind of stuff, and been like find ways to, claw back in and make the opposition work for their win. And this time that worked out really well. Nick Suzuki gets his second goal of the season later on in the second period. Ivan Demidov is able to get the assist there, and Slavkovsky gets his first assist of the season as well. So, all nice for all three of those guys to be getting points. Slav, for sure, I think people have been kind of talking about him and his lack of point production. So, nice to see him get a multi-point night, actually. So, good for that. And then Demidov, just a fantastic pass. Like it was kind of like a scramble in front, a lot of shots. Slavkovsky, I think, was more so trying to shoot that back on net and end up getting over to Demidov. I think he might have passed it, but regardless, he was like in front of the net, kind of hacking at it. It got over to Demidov, and most people in that situation, defensemen in that situation, would probably assume that Demidov was throwing that right back at the net, considering the all the traffic and chaos that's been going on in the last couple seconds there. But he's able to make a really nice like heads up play, find Suzuki just wide open. So wide open that really the only thing that was blocking Suzuki from getting that goal was Cole Caulfield, who was just kind of standing in front of him. He had to like jump out of the way to make sure that Suzuki's shot would get to the net. But there was like the goaltender had absolutely no chance on that one. Demidov just made a really nice pass, and it found its way to Suzuki is able to put that one in. That's only his second goal of the year. He's got I have no idea, honestly, but he's got a good amount of points. It's his only point of the night. He's been pretty good assist wise throughout this season so far. But yeah, good to see him get on the score sheet goals wise, and just like a really nice play by Demidov. That's one of 3 points he got tonight as well. So he's had a really, really nice game. Slavkovsky gets another one kind of early on in the third period, and another power play. He breaks a stick on the shot, and it still goes in, which is some absolute aura from Slavkovsky there. And good to see him getting goals too. That's his fourth of the season, which kind of brings him. I'm sure there's a ton of people who have 4 goals or whatever, but he's only 3 behind Caulfield, and I believe that still stands as tied for the best in the league. It might not actually. Yeah, no, Shane Pinto has 8 now, so he's number 1 in the league in goals, which is kind of interesting. On a sidebar, Shane Pinto, not necessarily somebody I would think would be, in the league lead for goals, but good for him, getting some goals. The gambling man himself. So, I won't speak too much on that, but. Yeah, but I mean, 4 goals for Slav, especially at this stage in the season. Usually, he's called second half Slav for a reason these past couple of years, but now it's starting to look like he's playing a more complete game. Earlier in the season, I think he's got 5 points after tonight, so good to see that. Like 5 points in 10 games played. He keeps that up. He's looking pretty good in terms of his point production. I think. Like a lot of people will just look at it, bare bones at, the way that Slavkovsky has been producing and be like, oh, like, he's a first overall selection. He should be putting up, 100-point seasons, whatever. But I think you really have to watch the games. And if you watch the games and watch his shifts, like he's commanding the puck. He's commanding ice. He's making nice plays every time he's out there. And like really just, I personally believe that, Suzuki and Caulfield, for how good they are and how much praise they get, I don't think that they would be, nearly as good or in nearly as many positions to score if Slavkovsky isn't also on that line, doing the dirty work and the things that don't necessarily show up on the score sheet. He's getting into puck battles on the boards. He's winning battles. He's making nice plays, making nice passes. He's gotten a ton of shots on net. I don't know how many he's got, but I feel like he's always getting, a couple shots, some one-timers and things like that. And, eventually those things are going to find their way in, as it did today. Demidov, another assist there. He's able to make that heads-up second pass there off of, I think it was Carrier who got the initial shot, went to Demidov, and he's able to kind of hand that off to Slavkovsky, and he buries it, breaks his stick in the process, but it doesn't really matter. Still had enough oomph on it to get through to the net. So really good, and power play goal as well. That's a second power play goal of the game. And what do you know? You get Demidov on your first power play unit, and suddenly the power play is looking a little bit better. I don't know why we didn't start with that, but yeah, it's looking a lot better now. A lot happier with that. So yeah, and really happy for Slav as well. Like, it's good to see him getting some points, and hopefully that will come with some your confidence that comes with that, and he's able to command the puck a little bit more. But really, like, you have to watch the games, and like to see the fact that he's not necessarily getting points he is today, but outside of that, like, he's still doing a lot of stuff for this team that doesn't get on the score sheet that is contributing to our win. So regardless of the points he gets, he could, in my book, he could get 0 points this year, but if he's getting those fourth assists, like winning puck battles that lead to offensive possessions and goals for, like, putting hits on, all that kind of stuff, like, that's a win in my book. And honestly, at this point, like, at this where we're at with the Canadians this year and where we want to be, like, the points do not matter. Like, I think one of the things I would like to say is just ask a Florida Panthers game, ask one of the four of those guys if they give a shit about how many points Sam Reinhart or Barkov or whatever those guys are putting up. They don't care because they won, back-to-back Stanley Cups. And by the way, if I remember correctly, Sam Reinhart had like something in like the 80s or whatever in points last year, and he was like the team leader for the Florida Panthers. So like 100-point seasons do not add up to Stanley Cup championships. It is all about, getting the wins and winning when it matters. So that's kind of my soapbox on that. I think Slavkovsky is playing great, and it's good to see him get points. But either way, I've been really satisfied with this game so far. Mike Matheson gets another one from Carrier and Bolduc. He just kind of has a nice play. I mean, it's one of those moments where you're like, damn, Mike Matheson is a little bit better than I remember him being. He's still good, and he makes really smart plays, and some not so smart plays, but whatever. He's got the puck at the point, and he kind of does a little stutter step to get around a block, and then just absolutely wires one to the top left corner, top right corner. That goes past Lincoln in. And a nice goal, and that gives us some good insurance there. It gives us the lead. So yeah, I mean, like, and just like that's like the resilience of the group. It's good to see. They're able to kind of pile them on. I think those goals were 7 minutes apart. And then, feeding off the last 5 minutes of the second period. And then Ivan Demidov gets his goal. He gets a pass from Carrier, and he kind of just wires that one, kind of same position on Lankinen. It looks like it goes off a defenseman's stick and then finds its way to the net, but still, a really nice shot. Gets his second of the year there, and that gives him 3 points on the night too. So it's a really good game from him, and that gives us some insurance that we ended up needing, and it ended up being the game-winning goal. Because Connor Garland, with a little under 4 minutes to go, he gets a nice tip from Pedersen, and that kind of goes in past Dobesh. But that's a tough one. You can't save them all, and tip shots and stuff like that are hard to save there. But yeah, so it's a really good game. I think you can look back at this and be like, we won a close one, but I think really it's just like the moral of the story in this game is just the Canadians, when they're on, they're on, and they just need to find a way. I've been saying it in the past couple of videos, but they just need to find a way to be on for 60 minutes. Like, when they were on, like, through this stretch of, like, the end of the second period, are really, like, they started kind of turning it up a little bit, like, halfway through the second period, and then, most of the third period, like, we dominated the back half of that game, and then, Vancouver clawed back with one, but at that point, they were, losing effort there. But if we can play like that in the first period and first half of the second period, then we'd really be somewhere. So it's just I think it's just a learning thing. There'll be games where that'll happen, I think, and there'll be games where it won't. They're a young team, all that kind of stuff. So you have to consider all of those variables and things like that. So, but yeah, I'm really satisfied with the way that that goes. And like this is like another game, another thing where you can look it back and be like this is a resilient group that just believes in themselves and they do not give up. And I think that that is a really huge attribute to have as a team. Like we know a lot about like the group like camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. They're really kind of tight knit bond and all that kind of stuff. But just the fact that like when they're on the ice, this is like turning into success for the group, and just this group has this resiliency to them where they just like even when they're down or they're up or whatever, like they want to win games and they find a way to win games. Like that's definitely a trait of a really good team, is a team that can just find a way to win no matter what. And it looks like the Canadians have had many games this season. Seattle for one, the game against the Predators, and those kind of games like that. We've had multiple efforts where the Canadians are down but not out, and they find a way to claw themselves back in and get a win there. So it's just really impressive to see what they're doing this year, and just I think I speak for everyone when I say we expected a little bit of a step up from the way that we've been playing last year. But if you had told me in August that we'd start the year 7-3-0, I would be really satisfied with that. So yeah, like that's the position we're at right now. So it's looking really good. That's really all there is to say. We're still sitting at the top of the Atlantic. A really interesting mix of teams in the top of the Atlantic too. We got Montreal is at the top with 14 points, 7-3-0. Detroit 6-3-0. They got they're 2 points behind us. And then Florida in that third place position, and then Washington and the Islanders in the wild card position. So currently the Leafs not in a great position. Buffalo, Ottawa, those teams not in a great position either. Boston's kind of kicking themselves a little bit right now. They're sitting near the bottom of the East. So obviously the playoffs do not start now. They start quite a long time from now, but it is good to see that the Canadians are winning games and they're putting themselves in a position where when the playoffs are coming around, in April, we'll be thankful for the win streak, the wins that we have right now. So next game coming up on Tuesday against the Kraken, at the end of our road trip. So hopefully we can end that strong and then get back home, keep this winning streak going. So it should be interesting. A couple days off, which is nice. So yeah, but it should be interesting to see how we play, in a rematch against the Kraken. But that all remains to be seen. So, yep, great game today. I will see you guys on Tuesday.